This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. I think we have all our speakers connected, as well as our chair connected, Mr. Mdwaba. So just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Anita, and I am a project manager at the International Organization of Employers. And I'd like to thank you for, taking the time and being available to join this particular digital conference. And we decided to make this conference really as a platform for our members in Africa to be able to share the experiences and best practices that they have in the face of the COVID-19 crisis. These are really not normal times. We're aware of that. And it's an opportunity to really let us know how this is impacting you, how this is impacting the country, and what this is meaning for the private sector as well as for business representatives. So would the chair be available to start off the meeting?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anita. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. I'd like to welcome everyone to this UMTIS webinar that we are having as the IOE. Most of you are friends, so I'm not going to start by saying who the IOE is. I think if anybody considers me to have been mistaken, so please correct me, but the International Organization of Employers is, as you know, the convener of this conversation, of these chats, the digital conferences that we are having. We've been having quite a number of these. Roberto Suárez, who's our Secretary General, is with us. And we have a number of other participants. We've got Torky El Sayed from Egypt. Is Torky here? Can I get an indication that Torky has connected? Just want to go through my participants whilst waiting for Torky.
No, I'm here, Mthunzi. How are you?
I'm good, Torky. Lovely to hear your voice in these tough times. Jacqueline Mugo from Kenya. Is Jacqueline here? Whilst waiting for Jacqueline, George Khaki from Malawi. George, are you with us? Checking George.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Lovely to hear from you. Welcome, George.
Thank you.
From Zimbabwe, Israel Murefu. Israel, are you with us? Israel? Okay, Israel is perhaps still trying to connect. And then from Nigeria, Timothy Olawale, are you with us?
Good morning, Mthunzi. I'm here.
Good morning, my brother. So I think in the best interests of the other colleagues who are with us already, who are here on time, and all our guests, we're going to start. I will let you know when Jacqueline Mugo from Kenya is with us and when Israel has also connected. Colleagues, Anita has already done the introduction to tell you why we are having this conversation, but I think just so that we can focus our conversations, and I've mentioned already that we've had a number of these chats. Roberto yesterday, together with Guy Ryder, and Guy Ryder being the DG of the ILO, I'm sure everyone knows, and Sharon Barrows, who is the boss lady from ITUC, the largest trade union run from Brussels, and which of course is our counterpart in the International Labour Organization, but also we work a lot with ITUC in the G20 process, the G7 process, in terms of the B20 conversations that we have. They had a conversation with the Global Compact yesterday, and we've been having a number of those. And basically everybody is possessed with trying to find a way forward for how we can all find ways that are suitable for us in our different regions, in our different countries, because one thing that is clear is that we cannot use the same measures to deal with all the challenges that we have everywhere throughout the world. I think, though, I must also mention to you, in case you've missed it, that the IOE a few days ago, Monday morning, went out on what I would refer to as a call of arms to try and galvanize support and ensure that everybody works on a very collaborative platform, collaborative within the UN, collaborative beyond the UN, but collaborative in trying to ensure that all of us are focused in trying to help everyone in getting the economy back, in getting the enterprises to do what they're supposed to do, so that we don't lose jobs, so that we can create jobs, but more importantly at this point in time, we would want to preserve the jobs whilst we create jobs, because if we can preserve the jobs for a start, I think we shall be doing a lot. So we've received a huge response in terms of our call to all and sundry to collaborate. A few days ago, we got an indication that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has $1 trillion that it has available to try and deal and help in setting up some kind of a global fund. And we've also been told through, and also it's in the media now, that in the last few days, countries such as Rwanda had already applied to the IMF. Rwanda had applied for $109 million US. Senegal had already applied for $221 million US. And also I read in an article this morning that has been written by a colleague of ours in Bangladesh, Farouk, that in that country, they're already having very big challenges because of the level of informality, the level of manufacturing, the reliance that the economy has on the various brands throughout the world, that this much compared to other years that already received cancellation of a $2.5 billion in orders from the brands, which of course, as you can imagine, causes a huge hemorrhage on their economy. Over 200,000 people who are living outside the country, who send remittances home, are back home. So as a result, there is a huge challenge on how to help and support these colleagues who've gone back home, who have, as you can imagine, many families that have a reliance on them. So in terms of Africa as a continent, I think we also, Jackie, I covered a lot of background to make sure that when you connect, you don't miss the Africa specific discussion. I see you've just come. Welcome.
connected. We were having problems connecting. I've been here from the beginning and hearing you actually.
Ah, okay. It's just your beautiful face that I didn't see, but your ears were there, so that's great. So welcome then in terms of your countenance appearance, Jackie. Is Israel perhaps also here now? Israel still not here. Okay, but we're going to proceed, colleagues. I think to try and focus the conversation, because this is going to be a conversation for about an hour. And then the remainder of the time, we expect questions, we expect comments. The main preoccupation and objective is to share our experiences, whether by way of reactive means or by proactive means, ways in which suggestions can be made to us. The IOE is also collating all the different responses throughout the world for us and keeping a very rich database on what is happening, so that we can all compare notes, we can all have a look and see what works in other parts and see whether we can borrow from that as to what we can use. But the digital conference will be reviewing what social and economic measures have been taken by your government and the different governments, what has been the private sector's reaction, and Roberto will cover, I think, a large part in terms of what the internationally coordinated, concerted responses have been so far, what we would like to see as the IOE for us to ensure that things do get better. We also have to look amongst yourselves, if you can share with us which sectors have been hardest hit. And I think when we talk about our continent, we must also not miss talking about how informality is being impacted, the infrastructure challenges we might have in response to the COVID-19, and how does this crisis compare to previous crises for us in the region. Now, some people, I think more specifically the article I referred to this morning that was written by Farouk in the Asian region, are saying that the 2009 crisis may be referred to as what other people are calling a car crash. But in terms of this particular crisis, they're referring to it as a train wreck. Now that's a big difference. One little car crash being the financial crisis, which we thought was the biggest synchronized crisis we've ever seen, to what is referred to as a train wreck currently. So colleagues, I'm going to start. Roberto, if you're ready, I'd like you to kick off and share with our colleagues what you have been experiencing, what recommendations you have. So over to you, Roberto.
Thank you, Mthunzi. I have to start already congratulating all of you. I think that we have 84 participants, and it's likely that that will up, and that's an important, substantial number, which already says a lot about the interest in this exchange. Before that, I may remind some logistics which are, I think, important. Anita said that to keep all of us mute, not unmute, and also that you have the chat tool on the side that help us and help you, Mthunzi, to optimize the time with the questions and answers. So just please feel totally free to raise your questions there, because that will be taken after I understand that Mthunzi, you at the end will also gather them, or we can help you with that, or Anita can help you with that to see what are how we can have an interaction. My intention here is not to take much time, is just to tell you what we are doing and what we are witnessing. And I had prepared a slide, just 2 or 3 slides maximum. We are using very much, if we go to the first slide, please, we are using very much a word which is unprecedented. And now, last year we used another word which was disruption, and now this year after the crisis, we are saying this is an unprecedented crisis. And one of the elements is that never before it has been so global. I mean, what you are witnessing now is something that started in China, came to Europe, is going now to Africa and the Latin America, in USA, but also in Asia. Mthunzi was referring to that. In South Asia, the situation of many countries is very, very critical. If you compare it with the financial crisis in 2008, well, it affected globally the world, but not to the extent that it's affecting now. And in the situation is that at the same time you have companies being locked down, or and also individuals being asked to be confined in their own homes. So you have the demand and the offer at the same time being totally blocked, except some sectors, except some activities. So that's creating, on the one side, a global emergency, but also a kind of shock in the economy, which we have not witnessed since the Second World War, perhaps. I don't have the figures exactly here. The need to act globally is more pertinent than ever, and that's what we have been trying to do. We have been trying to reach our colleagues in the unions, but also other international organizations. We are working with the World Health Organization. We are working also, of course, with the G20. We are working to some extent with the G7, but beyond that, of course, with our main partners, which is the ILO, to give answers and to act quickly and to act effectively. We, as IOE, have changed drastically our working plan. And of course, as many of you, we have put into place what we call a business continuity plan. But basically what we have done is to arrange a specific digital exchanges. And I have to say, we have all become digitally forced. And remember, Mthunzi, I've said that in the past, we were discussing last year where how the world of work was being disrupted and how the digital trends are changing the way we work. This is just now coming in a forced manner for all of us. So if there's any positive element on this emergency, is that we, on a forced manner, are becoming all digital. All our organizations are becoming digital, companies are becoming digital, international organizations at the same time have to use digital tools. So what we have is arranged a specific digital exchange. We don't want to use the word webinars. Webinar still is a kind of, even if it's a technical world, is a limited concept. What we are witnessing is a wide range of participants in our exchanges, and also a wide range of interaction, needing also always to optimize our time. And we also created a digital platform. And Mthunzi, you referred to that. What we put into this digital platform is not just a gathering of measures. What we are trying now to get is information that you, as members of IOE and companies linked to the IOE, provide us in terms of impact. These measures that your government is putting into place, to what extent have any effect, or what are your concerns? This is the critical added value that many of the other platforms that you see around do not have, your assessment. And we are going to work with that. Of course, that means also that we are providing some outputs related to telework policies, outputs related, and we are working now with an external collaboration on what is working and not working in terms of economic advocacies. We are now all talking about liquidity. Companies need drastically cash, need drastically liquidity, access to loans, but what works and what doesn't work? Because what we see is that many of this liquidity is not getting there. It's not getting to the companies, it's not getting to the workers. So there are many requirements, much bureaucracy, currency systems that are not. And then you have the problem of informality in your countries, where even if you have this liquidity going to the formal sector, that's not getting into the informal sector. And even less when people are confined and don't have the tools, the digital tools to use it. So these kind of insights on what's working on what we work, we are also working on that from the economic angle, but also from the employment angle. And there we know that many of your countries are already putting into place, and thank you for the insights that you are providing us and the inputs, like short-term, part-time, what is called unemployment ad hoc systems, benefit systems, or also temporary dismissals, all these kind of, let's call it innovative employment framework to face the crisis. We are gathering them and giving a kind of assessment based also on the experience that others have on this angle. And finally, of course, I told you that we are working with the World Health Organization. We are providing some guidance on health and safety issues, how to deal with the crisis right now, but we need also to look at the coming future. And the coming future means that people will have to resume work, and it's not going to be easy resuming work in the same manner. I think that the world is changing, the world order is changing politically, but also the way we work is drastically changing. So going back to normal, not sure is going to take place. But what we have to plan is how to resume work in an effective manner. The effects and the consequences of the crisis in terms of employment, we are using a word, are devastating in many sense, but it will be less and less devastating for companies and employees if we manage to have a kind of set of measures in critical sectors that are affected. And meaning by that, the transport sector, the industry, depends on each country, the tourism, the hotels, etc. We are identifying them, and we are also working with these sectors globally, trying to identify these measures that can be critical for a quick recovery, because if this quick recovery does not come back soon, then we'll have much more problems. So if you go to the next slide, and if we finish with that, you will see the digital conference that we have provided. All of them are recorded. We have presentations. Those are at your disposal. So please do not hesitate to look at that in the platform of IOE, and also to come to us if you have doubts. We have regional exchanges, and we have also the regional exchange with other regions, which is quite fruitful in terms of also having some ideas which can be helpful also for each other. And I think that's the final one. Well, there's another slide, but that, if we go to the next one, we produce a joint statement with IOE and I2, between IOE and I2. I think that was a quick action, and I want to help also Mthunzi for his support on that, because it's not always easy. Identifying key messages, but not just messages, areas of action for the workers and employers for the future. And meaning by that, one of them is liquidity has to get to the real economy. Access to credit has to go there. Workers are supporting us on that for SMEs, but also for the informal economy. And one of the other messages that we are strengthening with the unions is, to some extent, we need to look at the future also in terms of social protection. It's not just all about social protection, but at the end of the day, some safety nets are needed, but also a business environment. And that's where they are assuming and integrating. And that's a qualitative change. I mean, they assume that if you don't have a sustainable enterprise approach, meaning by that a business environment which is helpful to create jobs in the coming future, you will not get a quick recovery. You will have much more devastating consequences. So we hope that that will help. I finish here, and sorry if I was a little bit longer than foreseen. Thank you very much, Mthunzi, for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Roberto. You were not long. I think it was good to give a global context so that colleagues are all with us. I think just very quickly, colleagues, some colleagues are asking me, I must welcome a few faces I see here. There's a colleague of mine from South Africa, Monique, just joined us. Monique was asking where they can share. So you can send your messages on here on this platform, as you are doing now, where you were asking me questions. But in terms of sending your responses, your country initiatives, suggestions that you might have, Anita has put on her email address. I'm sure everybody can see it right now as we speak on the side there. Awuku, AWUKU @IOE-EMP.com, or Balikungeri, BALIKUNGERI @IOE-EMP.com. I've also responded to France, who was asking if the slides will be shared. Yes, the slides will be shared. As long as you are registered, what I'll ask Anita to do is to share the slides to everybody that's on here right now. There's some comments that have been made by other colleagues that I'll come back to later. For now, I'd like to move over to Egypt. El Sayed Torky, our colleague from the Federation of Egyptian Industries. Over to you, El Sayed.
Thank you, Mthunzi. I'd like to thank first the IOE so much for for taking this excellent initiative of organizing this digital conference for African countries only, as we have common circumstances. So sharing experiences will really be very useful and practical. I try to be brief as much as I can so that we can leave enough time for open discussion. I'll start with the economic and social measures taken by the government during this period, which was really a very successful bunch of measures welcomed by the people here. The central bank has decided to delay due date of all types of consumers' small business loans, including mortgages and car loans, for 6 months. The Prime Minister has reduced the prices of natural gas and electricity provided to industrial sector. The President has announced the postponement of the outstanding property tax on factories and touristic institutions for 3 months. The government has decided to support workers in hotels and tourism sector by 3.2 billion US dollars. The government has lowered the stamp tax on equities investments and has decided to cut the dividends tax rates from 50 to 5% imposed on companies, on listed companies. The most affected sectors, of course, the teleworking has started from day one. At the beginning, it was not that efficient because it is new for us in Egypt to work from home, but now it's working good. Of course, the tourism sector was the most affected sector from this crisis. We have also the exporting industries, mainly the ready-made garment has very badly affected. The building and construction sector also. The remittance of Egyptians abroad and South Canal revenues. As what the Federation has reacted vis-a-vis the crisis, we have a three-angle approach. The first one, how can we protect our members, the business side of the industrial sector? The second one, how we have worked to provide health protection for workers and companies, and at the end, our social responsibility. We have assumed a very good role in our social responsibility vis-a-vis our society. So we have from day one an ongoing dialogue with the public authorities, starting with the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, of Industry, of Social Solidarity, of Labor, to secure the needs of our members and to put our expertise under the disposal of the government to assure that the industrial sector can play its required role to secure the needs of the countries during this critical period, because the point is the imports has been heavily affected, so we should find the local replacement as soon as possible. We have asked the government to speed up the payment of the administration the payment of to private suppliers, and we have participated at the Solidarity Fund, which has been created to support the seasonal and daily workers, and we have within 2 weeks 1.5 million workers registered in this fund, and the government will provide them the minimum remuneration for 3 months. Also, we have asked the government to facilitate the customers' procedures, especially by increasing the items of the whitelist, which is the fast-track inspection. We have negotiated with the government the exemption of some vital sectors, mainly food and health, of the curfew time frame, because the curfew was till 7 p.m. from 7 p.m. till 6 a.m. But yesterday it has been extended for 2 weeks. But in the same time, the government have raised the time frame of the curfew to be from 8 to 6. We have also obtained an approval from the government to allow our members to open new production lines by extending their license to be able to produce the detergents and the new health needed stuff. We have cooperated with the Ministry of Industry to stop exporting the raw material needed for the production of personal protective supplies, and to change the to facilitate the legal procedures of changing the activities of some of our members to be able to quickly produce the personal protective supplies. We have met some challenges that some of the required important measures need legislative reforms. The government cannot apply it as quickly as we wish. We have also a challenge raised from the trade unions, who have asked to stop production and asked to have workers stayed at home, a full payment. And this was not accepted by the employers, and in the same time we cannot stop production, which will be very risky for the country. From the other side of view, we have decided to assume as much as we can our social responsibility. So we have allocated a good amount of money to repair and maintain 460 ventilators. And we through the support of our members like General Electric and etc. We also we are cooperating with the UNFPA in Cairo, who have initiated a project with the WHO and the Ministry of Health in Egypt to support 50,000 women all over Egypt, mainly fourth-line health workers. So we motivate our members to reallocate part of their CSR funds towards this initiative. If I'd like to compare what have happened during the Arab Spring in 2011 and now, I can say that now it's worse than before, than the Arab Spring, because at that time the period of the curfew was not as long as now. It was based on security measures, not on health measures. So the daily workers and the informal sector has been affected very badly during the coronavirus crisis, while during the Arab Spring it was a very good opportunity for them to flourish. We had feelings that the situation during the Arab Spring is however under control. We know where the negative side come from, but here we don't see our enemy. The import and the export activities have been affected very negatively now compared to the period of the Arab Spring. Also, the freedom of movement now is very limited compared to the other to the Arab Spring, and the also psychologically the uncertainty of the duration of the crisis here now has affected very negatively the attitude of the people. So there was a rush to on the consuming foodstuff goods, followed by a rush on the withdrawal, cash withdrawal from the banks. I heard that during 2 weeks, the Egyptians have withdrawn around 30 billion Egyptian pound, divided by 15 to know the equivalent in dollars, which has obliged the central bank to put a maximum limit for cash withdrawal, daily maximum. This is a nutshell of what have done in Egypt. And, thank you for this, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, El Sayed. Appreciate it. I think the takeaways is that the sectors that have been affected are tourism, export, construction, and remittances from abroad, quite similar to the Bangladesh example that I gave. Then also you just mentioned that this crisis is much more grave than the Arab Spring, you know, because there is no way to escape it. So when you look at the financial crisis, the synchronized financial crisis that I said some people had compared to a car crash, then there's the Arab Spring, and then there is this as well in terms of the globality of this one that people have compared to a train wreck. So we're seeing something very unprecedented. Colleagues, there's a lot of comments made on the side. I'm not going to repeat them in the interest of time. Everybody can read what everybody is saying. Some people are introducing other initiatives that they are busy with, like the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, an NPO focused on growing the social enterprise. They have weekly webinars that they are hosting. So you have a look at that on the side panel. But there's a question I want to mention by Maxwell Pirikisi, asking about what do we think is going to happen with the waste side of things. The fact that the masks, for example, may not have a particular special medical waste disposal program. They end up becoming an environmental risk. There's a question from David from Ethiopia, which maybe Jackie can also address if there is any part of it that you've got in your presentation. And the question by David is, what kind of financial support are we getting from the commercial banks? Are they rendering any assistance to the business community? There are examples. South Africans that are with us will share some examples later if we get an opportunity, but I can cover that in the wrap up as well as to what some of the banks are doing here in South Africa, and we'll get other comparative information. Now we're going to move over to Jacqueline Mugo from FKE, the Federation of Kenyan Employers, who's also the Secretary General for Business Africa, and also a governing body member with us in the ILO. Over to you, Jackie. Jackie, are you there?
I'm there.
Okay, over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. I hope you can hear me. So I was asked to share the Kenyan situation, some of the steps taken by government to support private sector in this process, what my federation in particular has done, and then as we look to the future, what is the role of the private sector and what are some steps we can take to assist in the recovery from the COVID situation? I think a lot of the things I would have wanted to say were partially covered by Roberto in his opening speech. And I just want to say that there are very clear indications that COVID-19 is going to change the landscape in which business is done, and it's going to drastically reduce the projections in terms of growth that Africa has been experiencing for a very long time. The sectors in Kenya that have been impacted are really practically the same as what my colleague from Egypt has shared. It's tourism, it's hospitality, it's manufacturing, wholesale and retail, transport sector, and of course, agriculture, which is the mainstay of African economies, and a very sharp drop in the diaspora remittances. As soon as it became clear that Kenya was affected by COVID-19, the government swung into action and gave directives on what was expected from citizens and from the business sector to help reduce the incidences of infection. Sorry, we're having problems loading my slides, so I'm just talking in the interest of time. As we stand today, Kenya has some 5,280 people affected. 179 are confirmed cases. We have lost 6 people, but 9 have also recovered. But since the government has been tracking the rate of infections and how many people these 179 people have been in contact with, the future looks scary, and we expect exponential growth in those numbers. So it became very clear to us as business people that we needed to work alongside government in helping to address the risk of infection by a large majority of the population. What the Federation of Kenya Employers did was to issue guidelines and protocols to our members to help them to cope with the challenge of COVID-19. The government issued a directive that employers should allow as many people as possible to work from home. Now, that was a new concept. What did it mean working from home? We've had to have conversations around this, and business has done what they can to reduce drastically the numbers of people coming to the workplace on a daily basis. We've also invested heavily in health and safety issues at the workplace and availing services online to members, pretty much what the IOE has done, which is a new territory for us, but employers have appreciated it. I'm also happy to say that our government has taken a very positive approach in terms of the engagement that they've had with us as employers. We gave a whole raft of proposals in our engagements with government, which has been a lot, and gave memorandums on a whole host of initiatives that the government could take. We wanted tax rebates, we wanted softer loans, and the banks have come through. If I could briefly address what David from Ethiopia was asking, yes, the banks have reviewed their terms of loans. They have actually welcomed everybody who currently has a loan to renegotiate those terms. Where people want moratoriums or longer periods of repayment, they've been willing to do that. In many cases in Kenya, we had what we call the credit rating. And if you had a bad record with the banks, then you wouldn't be allowed to borrow any money. The banks have suspended that. And so pretty much any Kenyan who wants to borrow money or who already has a loan can go and renegotiate those terms. And also, especially for the SMEs, there is money that they can go and borrow on fairly soft terms. So these were some of the recommendations.
Jackie,
yes.
May I just interrupt you? If you are struggling
yes.
with your PowerPoint, don't worry. The IOE can take over control and do it for you remotely. Okay?
It's now come alive, unless you're seeing problems with it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It's not
Sorry
functioning
about the
okay. It's functioning fine.
Right,
since I want to summarize, it's probably easier for me to do it.
Okay. Okay.
So in the raft of proposals that the Federation gave to government, it covered the issue of supply of basic essential commodities, tax reduction, some social protection initiatives, and what we were calling a special crisis fund, pretty much what I think Mthunzi was saying has been initiated elsewhere. And I'm happy to say that by and large, the government did address the issue of the tax regime in this country, which has been very, very stringent on business, and dropped the requirement for those in the lowest cadre of salaries, those earning 24,000 Kenya shillings and below are not required to pay tax now. They've also reduced the top rate of taxation, which was sitting at 30% for the high income earners. That was reduced to 25%. Corporate tax was also similarly reduced from 30% to 25%. A reduction in what we were calling turnover tax, which was really very difficult for the SMEs, because the turnover tax was saying that if you're an SME and you've not been paying tax, and the government just looks at your turnover and requires you to pay 3% in terms of tax, which didn't make sense, because you may have high turnover, but at the bottom line is negative. So we're very happy that that has been reduced to 1%. We would have liked to see that waived completely, but that is what the government could do at present. We've also seen a reduction in VAT from 16% to 14%. We realize as business people that we'll have to keep engaging government on these reductions in taxes, and I think there's more that needs to be done, because indications are that COVID-19 is going to be a drawn-out affair. In terms of the operations in the country, we're currently operating under curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. You cannot move in the country. But for the towns that have been largely impacted by COVID-19, because there are very heavy rates of infections in the capital and in 2 or 3 other cities, those are now under lockdown. No one can come in or out. And the government, I think, is slowly moving to a situation of a total lockdown, as has happened in many other countries. But one of the biggest challenges we are facing is what to do with the informal settlements. So in terms of the outcomes of our advocacy, we've seen a change in the tax regime. We've seen some provisions also in terms of social protection. Unfortunately, like many other African countries, we do not have a social protection system in place. And this makes Africa, I think, very, very vulnerable. But there are additional funds which have been released to be spent on what we call the vulnerable groups, such as the elderly, the orphaned, the youth, and women, and people like that. We've also seen money coming out of the Universal Health Care Kitty, 1 billion shillings, to help cushion those Kenyans who would be impacted. And we are still pushing very hard for a categorical statement from the insurance sector that they will be covering COVID-19. Many of them are willing to do that, but I think they're still looking at it from a risk perspective. And what we have proposed as employers is that perhaps they could put a limit so that they are not overexposed, but so that people can be sure that they get insurance cover for those in the formal economy. For those in the informal economy, we are looking at the universal health care funds, and the government is reserving money towards that end. So the engagement continues, because this COVID-19 situation changes on a daily basis. And I think as we continue engaging government, we are also asking our members to contribute to what is a COVID crisis fund, which the state created about 10 days ago. And there's private sector representation on it, because the realization is that African governments cannot cope on their own. They have to partner with the private sector, and we are appealing to our members to contribute to that fund, either in cash or in kind, so that we can support ourselves as a country at this time. So some recommendations. I think from our perspective, there's very urgent need for scenario planning. As private sector people, we're always planning, but if there was ever time that that was needed, it is now. In a situation that is rapidly changing, we need to do scenario planning at national level, at regional level, at continental level, and indeed globally, because Africa is not closed from the rest of the world. And I think from the conversations that Roberto the Director General of the ILO and the leader of the workers were saying, this is a global problem and we must also be seen to be participating at that level as a continent, which is not yet heavily affected. But the reality is that Africa, I think, will be greatly impacted by COVID-19. We may be coming into the challenge late, but inevitably, I think we're going to be hard hit, especially if you look at the prevalence of the informal economy, which Mthunzi talked about, and also the vulnerability of our people who are in informal settlements. In fact, for Kenya, I think this is the one reason why the government is holding out on the total lockdown. Because these people are saying that, look, we'd rather die of COVID-19, should we be affected, than dying of starvation. So if you lock us in, where will we get our food? They don't have fridges, they don't have water, and these kinds of things. So this is a big challenge for Africa, because these are people who depend on daily wages, they live from hand to mouth, and they cannot really plan long term. So I think this is one thing that we need to look at as a continent and partner with government to see what can be done. I have a slide on considerations on scenario planning, which I will skip because of time, but I think it will be shared. Also, it has become clear that COVID-19, initially we were looking at a 3-month time span. But I think the reality is that by June, we won't be out of the woods, and we need to look perhaps at 6 months and even beyond. The question is whether a vaccine will be found or not. If one is found in the next few months, 3 to 6 months, then perhaps 6 months down the road, we can begin to see some change, some lifting of the lockdowns and a reemergence of economic activity. I think it then becomes important for business to push for the incentives that many governments have currently given to be maintained throughout these 3 to 6 months and beyond, so that we can prop up businesses and prop up disposable capital and transactions to be facilitated, because this is something that business is going to need beyond 6 months, beyond 12 months. And it's also important for us to unlock and build value chains in strategic sectors, such as those that have been very heavily impacted, for instance, tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, agriculture, given the fact that they are heavily impacted by the reduced human mobility that we see at present. So the role of business in fighting this pandemic in the continent is huge. Of course, at the same time, that business sector is very is stretched at present for the reasons that we're discussing. It is true that this is a problem that will take all of us to participate in, and we also have a role in educating the citizenry and our workforce, and that is something that is happening in this country. But as I conclude, I want to end on a positive note, even at a time such as this, and that we need to prepare for a new future without COVID. No matter how long it takes, we'll get out of it. That future will be a very different future, as Roberto was talking about. We as an employers organization have been forced to digitalize. The future of work topic that we were talking about was suddenly thrust upon us. We've had to learn how to serve members digitally, how to hold webinars, how to hold conferences, and to do that on really very limited facilities. And that is what is going to determine the sustainability of many enterprises, the capacity they have to innovate and to simplify the way that they work. Collection of data is also important. We're in the process of doing a survey with the support of the ILO to see how business has been impacted and some of the initiatives they're taking, which can be replicated by others. I think the test of our capacity to do advocacy and to keep being heard and being relevant is ever more important, because there are opportunities even from this crisis. And I'm seeing Kenya beginning to produce items that we were importing for no reason other than that perhaps Africa likes importing. So we are seeing masks being produced here. We are seeing medical equipment being produced here because there's an over demand globally and we just couldn't cope. And suddenly with the change in the WHO advice that you didn't need masks, we are being required as a citizenry to wear masks. We didn't have them. So there are companies that have come up there and they are producing these masks. And I think COVID-19 gives Africa an opportunity to rethink our development strategy and to do more together as a continent to stimulate local supply, even as we embark on recovery down the road, and make what we can ourselves within the continent and only import that which we must absolutely import. So that is what I wanted to share by way of introduction, and I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I think that colleagues, I see quite a number of other people coming in and out. We have about 96 people that have connected. I think also it's lovely to see the interactivity and the high levels of engagement on the side. Please feel free. I've just typed that continue to send your ideas. Whilst we may not have time to deal with everything right now, today, we will be communicating with you. There will be follow-up webinars. We'll respond to the questions. We'll integrate the comments and the suggestions. But just picking on a few of the interesting things that Jackie said that for me are the take home is what she referred to as an agile scenario planning being required, agility. Agility is hugely necessary for us because, and when you talk about an agile scenario planning, is the fact that you realize that this is like quicksand. This is moving very fast. You can't be stuck on any one or two or three scenarios. You got to keep moving. But he then made a highly pertinent statement for our continent and maybe other continents as well, but particularly for us, that people are saying they would rather die from the COVID-19 virus rather than die of starvation. And I think this is the part that needs to focus the mind, because as much as we can talk about the immediate health crisis, and I've said this in my interviews as well when I was interviewed on radio here and on television, is that you cannot stop looking at the short, medium to long-term interventions of how do you ensure that the economy is running? How do you ensure that small, medium enterprises are continuing to operate as soon as possible after these lockdowns? I think the other question is one raised by our colleague from Tanzania, who's raised a very interesting point to say, what alternatives are there for African countries regarding containing the disease without necessarily shutting down already struggling economies and possible effects to the majority of the people who are employed in the informal sector? I think these are very pertinent questions for Africa. I think I also saw on another group, WhatsApp group, saying, is this lockdown, social distancing working for Africa, given the informal situation, given that sometimes you have so many people sharing very narrow, confined spaces? So please keep these in mind as we continue to share our experiences and the ways that we should be responding, but also read on the side the comments that we're having from everybody. Now, moving on, we've got George Khaki from Malawi, from the Employers Consultative Association of Malawi. George is going to be sharing his experiences in Malawi. Over to you, George.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, George. Over to you.
Thank you, Mthunzi. Welcome. I would like to share a few experiences from Malawi. So far, maybe the setting of Malawi could be quite different from other countries and similar to some. One thing that we are looking at in Malawi is that we are a landlocked country, and therefore for our exports and imports, we depend on countries that surround us. Like many other countries, we are agricultural dependent. Actually, agriculture contributes to over 70% of our export earnings, as well as just around 30% of the country's GDP. And as others have already said, we are largely an informal economy that largely depends on SMEs. In actual fact, the people that live in the rural areas are slightly over 85%. And we are a hand-to-mouth economy, whereby you depend on getting money today to go and buy your food, and tomorrow morning you also need to go around, look for some money so that you look for food. Now, as regards the challenges in fighting the COVID-19 in Malawi, these are not all of them, but just a selection of a few. Is that one, we have multiplicity of information sources. You get information on COVID-19 from all over. There are lots of WhatsApp groups, lots of Twitter groups, and what have you. So therefore, you find, no, here there is a cure for COVID-19, or there is a vaccine that has been found, or there is this that we can do to get rid of COVID-19. When this information goes out to the public out there and to the working masses, people get confused. They don't know what it is exactly that they should do. And this on its own is a challenge in fighting COVID-19. The political landscape, again, is not assisting us. Many of you may recall that we had an election that was annulled, and now there has to be a rerun of that election. And now the messages that are coming out on COVID-19 seem to indicate that the messages are tainted with politics. For example, I think just a few days ago, one of the cabinet committees that is responsible for managing COVID-19 issues made a declaration that the registration for the coming elections should not continue. Yet they have no mandate to do this. And largely this was viewed as political interference. And
Hello, George. Have we lost George? Looks like George has disconnected.
Let's give George 10 seconds to see if he reconnects.
Yeah, we'll just give George a few minutes to try and reconnect, colleagues. But in the meantime, I think let me just highlight again the chats on the side are very interesting and very pertinent. Let's please keep an eye on there. We welcome Farouk, who is attending our digital chat as a guest from Asia. You'll remember that I mentioned that Farouk had written a very interesting article that I shared with you at the beginning. I think Farouk, you probably joined after I'd shared how great your article was.
No, Mthunzi, thank you. I joined your conference right from the beginning. Thank you very much for referring my article. It's a on-ground, real-time experience that I narrated. Thank you.
Excellent, Farouk. Thank you very much. I think this is a time when we all need to compare notes and be able to learn from each other's experiences and challenges and responses. There's also some messages from Monique talking about the work they are doing. She's given her email address. You can have a look at that. And then, of course, there is a message from Samuel Asafa. Samuel and Gary Reinhardt come from ECTEMP. Gary also has some messages about the 3 phases that this is going to be taking as a crisis, and how each phase needs to be dealt with and the necessary interventions that we must have. And Samuel is also talking about that modalities could possibly work to reach out to workers, mostly of whom are self-employed, and enterprises in the informal sector, One view has been the expansion of social protection coverage, but how feasible are such measures in the middle of a pandemic and when government revenue has fallen sharply? Bev Jack also has a note that we are struggling here in the country to enforce the lockdown due to the impact of the informal sector, which is something that I covered a few minutes ago. It would be interesting to find out how effective the curfews have been in Kenya and Egypt, and what was the prime objective, and so on. So, colleagues, I just want to check again, is George still not there? George, checking?
I'm here.
Are you back? Okay, over to you. I was just doing some adverts for you whilst you are trying to reconnect. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I don't know where I left off, but I will continue. We have the slides there, and we have no unemployment benefits. That refers to the social protection benefits that others have talked about. And then in Malawi, unfortunately, we have no laws that support temporary layoffs. This means that if we were to go into a shutdown, companies would still require to pay their employees. This is now happening in the for example, the tourism sector, where employers are forced to either pay their employees though they are not being productive, and or either to lay off their employees, which is increasing unemployment. Moving on, what have been our responses so far? As ECAM, I think we have been commended for taking lead in making two proposals that we have submitted to government. And I'm happy to say that most of the proposals that we submitted to government were taken upon by government, and these were in the speech that was given by the head of state. In summary, these included the physical and the monetary measures, taxes included, making availability of a special loan fund to SMEs. These are some of the measures that were given out. And in ECAM, this has also made us to wake up, because previously we believed in holding seminars, meetings where we could meet. But now we have asked the ILO through Tempo, I saw Maria was in, so that maybe we come up with an infrastructure that we hold virtual meetings where we could quickly disseminate information to our members, as well as get feedback from the members. Like Kenya, we are also, with the help of ILO, doing a study on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy as well as in the world of work, so that we come up with evidence-based policy solutions that are believable to all stakeholders. One thing also that we have done in Malawi, there are a lot of business organizations that are out there. For example, we have the Chamber of Commerce, there is ECAM, there is Bankers Association, Insurance Association. But what this coronavirus has done is to bring us together, to work together, and to present our proposals to government as one front. And this has made us very, very credible. That I think it was last week we held 2 meetings with the Chief Secretary to the government, and they too saw that the business community was coming together. And I think there are also some industries that have come together to work with government to complement its health infrastructure and response. If you saw in one of my area slides, our health infrastructure in Malawi is very weak, such that we do not see ourselves coping with the COVID-19 pandemic if it hits hard on us. Currently, I did mention we have had 8 cases and 1 death so far. Businesses, as part of their corporate social responsibility, are working with the government to complement the health infrastructure. And the lessons going forward, I've already mentioned about working together as the business industry so that we build the strength. We are also saying that the industry on its own, besides looking at their employees, but they can play a huge role in assisting government to overcome the crisis that we are in. And as Jacqueline had mentioned, the crisis has opened up further business opportunities to manufacture goods that will be needed in the fight against COVID. I know we have now manufactured a prototype on wetsuits, and we are working on oxygen generators that would help in the hospitals that we are no longer able to import. But one of the most critical one is that now members are looking more to the employer organization to help them navigate through the crisis and in bringing together their views to government. So therefore, they are continuously calling us to ask us, what can we do? What should be the right response here? And therefore, though it is unfortunate, but it is now showing what value we are able to bring to employers, both practically as well as in advocacy and lobbying. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciated. I think also, you know, even the kind of connectivity challenges that you had could be also because the infrastructure is being very heavy loaded at the moment. So the infrastructural realities and challenges you're talking about are things we have to pay attention to. Whilst you were off, I talked about the lack of social protection and the fact that it's crippling the response for you, similarly to many other countries. I think whilst I'm chatting to you, Anita, I've got Jacqueline Mugo's presentation on there. I think you should be giving me Zimbabwe or Nigeria. Zimbabwe is next, or if Zimbabwe is not going to put on a presentation, let's not have Jacqueline there because we've already dealt with it. George has also talked about EBMOs, about our business organizations, our employer organizations being very relevant now. You know, that's the interesting thing, by the way, which is an opportunity. As much as there may be a crisis, there's always an opportunity. We know that from the IOE and ECTEMP survey that was done, over 70 respondents, 70% of the respondents were not our members. And they said they would join us if they felt that we were relevant. And for us as well, Jackie mentioned this as well in terms of us having to speed up our digital presence and prowess and also our online capabilities to ensure that we are far more relevant to our members who need our assistance now virtually to be able to function. George talked about a hand-to-mouth economy. Of course, you know, the life is also not made easy by recent changes that we've had even to, you know, the tobacco situations, which is a livelihood for you guys, the main livelihood for you in your country. So colleagues, let's keep the conversation on the side. I keep alerting you to the messages on the side. I've got lots of messages. Yanni from South Africa, Lindiwe Pomolo from the Kingdom of Lesotho, who says there isn't a confirmed case as yet, but they are all on lockdown. I think you need to know that Lesotho was one of the first countries to completely go on lockdown, which, as you can imagine, can be very tough because it's right in the middle of South Africa. And then many other colleagues making comments on the side. We'll come back to that. In the meantime, I see that Israel from the Employers Confederation of Zimbabwe is ready. Israel, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mthunzi. I do not have a written document or slides as such. I'm talking from my notes.
Okay, over to you.
Okay.
Please,
Zimbabwe,
please, Israel, sorry to interrupt you. Can you then do me a favor and make your notes available to Anita afterwards, even if you just take a photograph of your notes, because I've promised all the participants they'll be receiving slides afterwards, and the benefit your experiences and your challenges and the way you've responded and recommendations, so that everybody has got each other's notes. So continue.
Thank you. I think Zimbabwe was already in some kind of economic crisis when the COVID-19 crisis hit the country, in the sense that we were just recovering from the effects of Cyclone Idai, which impacted significantly on our infrastructure and on one of our provinces, which is a key province in terms of agricultural production. And also, we were in the midst of a currency crisis. Our currency has been losing value significantly over a very short period of time. And we also experiencing high levels of inflation. So this crisis came when we were already in another crisis. In terms of how government has responded by instituting a lockdown for 21 days, starting from the 30th of March, and it's supposed to end on the 19th of April. And all businesses, as we speak, are closed, except for what are referred to as essential services or essential businesses, where exceptions have been granted. So to a large measure, the country is at a standstill. We have a situation where probably the country was not exactly ready for this crisis, because it took a while before we could record our first confirmed case. But now we have 11 confirmed cases, and we have experienced 3 deaths out of those that have been confirmed. But we think that our capacity to test suspected cases is very limited, and we could very well have more than these confirmed cases because we do not have adequate capacity to test. But at least some testing is going on. And what happens is that I think the medical personnel will wait until all the symptoms of COVID-19 are exhibiting on a person before they can actually do a test, because they are trying to conserve resources. They do not have adequate testing kits. So testing is a bit slow for those people that are affected, and this could impact on others, because some of them could be mixing and mingling with people that are not affected, and thereby passing on the disease to those that may not have been affected. But the majority of cases that we've experienced are from people that have traveled from outside the country. Probably about 7 of the 11 cases are of people that have traveled outside Zimbabwe. In terms of reacting, the private sector has responded largely by cooperating with the conditions of the lockdown that have been put by government. But also the private sector has indicated, although we have not finished conducting surveys that we are conducting to find out the exact impact on businesses, but the private sector has indicated to government that it will require some kind of bailouts, particularly for those companies that whose incomes depend on an economy where there is no lockdown. And also, businesses have called for some tax relief. They've also called for subsidies and access to affordable credit. Although at this stage, government has not responded with any comprehensive package or any rescue package, but businesses have indicated to government what they think their requirements will be. And whilst the government, I think, would want to intervene, we think that the greatest limitation is going to be on resources, because government does not have adequate resources from as far as we are concerned, because at the moment government has actually appealed to the private sector and international donors to donate resources, financial and other resources, to assist in putting up infrastructure to take care of those people that would have been infected or affected by COVID-19. And we think that the numbers are likely to go up given the fact that we do not have adequate infrastructure. At the moment also, we have a situation where some hospitals are actually in the process of being refurbished so that they are ready to receive COVID-19 patients. There's one hospital in Harare, but which has got a very limited capacity, which is ready to take care of COVID-19 patients. But I think we need more hospitals that are able to take care of these patients. The private sector has come up with a program where they put resources together and have refurbished a disused hospital, which is owned by the Catholic Church. And we think that that hospital will go a long way in terms of assisting, in terms of building capacity to take care of COVID-19 patients. In terms of industries that have been affected significantly by this, we have the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, and the airlines industry. These are the industries that have been hard hit, I think, more than any other industries. But we also have manufacturing, which has been affected. We have mining, we have agriculture. And I think what compounds the problem with agriculture is that it is supposed to be supplying food resources to the nation, but it is hamstrung in the sense that some of their employees have to be observing the lockdown. But what is happening is that government is now easing some of the measures that it had put in place in order to allow agriculture to function properly so that food can be supplied to the rest of the country. We also have a situation where suppliers of food like your supermarkets are allowed to open from about 9 in the morning to about 3 in the afternoon so that people are able to have access to food or other groceries that are necessary for day-to-day living. But one of the problems which we are also encountering is that of enforcing the lockdown. We do not think that government has sufficient manpower to monitor the lockdown, because in the rural areas, it looks like life is still as it was before the lockdown. The lockdown is more visible in urban areas compared to rural areas. But one problem which we are encountering in urban areas is that of the informal sector. We have a huge informal sector where probably up to 90% of people that are employed are actually employed in the informal sector. And some of them are vendors, some of them are small enterprises, small to medium enterprises. And these are the people that are required to shut down. And some of them depend entirely on the income that they generate from vending, for example, or from the small business that they have for a living. And government now appears to have indicated that it will ease some of the measures on people that survive on working for themselves or people that are employed in small businesses. And I think what will happen is that this will compound the problem of social distancing, where it becomes very difficult to monitor who is supposed to be allowed to go to work and who is not supposed to be allowed to go to work. For formal businesses, it has been easier because companies have provided letters to their key people who are required to be at the workplace so that they have right of passage through police roadblocks or police checkpoints. So what is going to complicate matters is that in the informal sector, they do not have such facilities, and it can be very difficult for the police or the army to monitor who is supposed to be at work and who is not supposed to be at work and who is supposed to be staying at home. We also have situations where some violence has been experienced where police have beaten up people that are supposed to have broken the lockdown conditions. And these people are now complaining of violation of their rights. And it kind of complicates the situation in terms of monitoring compliance with the lockdown requirements. In terms of some of the measures that government has taken, we have a situation where government has indicated that it will provide financial support to vulnerable households or vulnerable groups, and they've indicated that they will be paying about $200 Zimbabwe dollars to each person who is classified as vulnerable. And 200 Zimbabwe dollars is about, if you are using the exchange rate, is about US $8. And this amount, I think, will not be adequate to sustain these individuals that do not have social protection or social security. Because like I said, 90% of working people are in the informal sector and they are not protected by social security. And so those people are likely to have it tough in terms of survival during the lockdown. Government has also issued instructions through the Ministry of Health on how people are supposed to conduct themselves during the lockdown, including things like social distancing, maintaining personal hygiene, and so forth. But the problem that we have at the moment is that of social distancing, because most of the poor families and poor communities, they tend to stay in one place, many people staying like in one place or one house, and social distancing becomes a bit of a problem there. We also have a problem of disposal of medical waste. There hasn't been any specific instruction on how people would dispose of things like your face masks, the gloves, and so forth. So people are just dumping these into the ordinary, ordinary bins or your ordinary trash cans and so forth. We think that this poses some risk. In terms of the banking industry responding, we have not seen much response from the banking industry, apart from the central bank easing the liquidity requirements by creating a fund which they would like to target to the productive sector, so that the productive sector can have access to loans. But the banking industry itself has not issued a statement. We have what is called the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe. They have not issued a statement confirming what exactly they are going to be doing in terms of assisting companies that are in distress, or in terms of assisting companies from a recovery point of view. But we expect that they should issue a statement. The central bank has only eased the what they call statutory reserve ratios from about 5% to 4.5%. And we think that this will not release much liquidity into the economy. I think we probably need more comprehensive measures. But like I said, the central bank was like in a catch-22 situation, because it was implementing a strategy where it wanted to reduce money supply in the country so that it could tame inflation. But because now there's need to create liquidity, it means that it may have to abandon that program so that it injects more liquidity into the economy, so that businesses probably are able to be resuscitated. In terms of some of the challenges that we have faced, for example, where we have got cross-border traders, we have had a situation where, because we're a landlocked country, we have had restrictions in terms of drivers trying to cross borders, truck drivers trying to cross borders into other countries or back into Zimbabwe because of certain restrictions that have been put in place. But we understand that SADC is putting in place some measures to ease the movement of cross-border traffic, particularly traffic that is carrying goods for purposes of sustaining livelihoods and also essential services. We also have a challenge where because of the current crisis, the central bank has now had to introduce the US dollar as a currency for transacting, because you will recall that we were in a US dollar or multi-currency environment up to about 2017, 2018, and now the US dollar had now been banned as a currency for transacting, but the central bank has now reintroduced the US dollar. So the major challenge is access to the US dollar, because a lot of people were depending on remittances from the diaspora, from their relatives in the diaspora. And now what it means is, given that the pandemic has also hit the diaspora, it means that remittances will be limited, and because trade is not moving as smooth as it should have been. Yes.
Israel, I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you to round up. I'm going to ask you to round up in exactly 30 seconds.
That's fine. In terms of recommendations, maybe I will just go to the recommendations and then I'll provide the notes that I indicated. Private sector needs a comprehensive rescue package in terms of subsidies or tax concessions, and also subscriptions holidays to some of the statutory bodies that employers subscribe to or pay to. We also need guidelines on issues like leave, because government is not expecting employers to deduct any payment for the time that people will be staying at home. We also need a proper comprehensive national recovery plan and a strategy to follow after the lockdown, because there is no clear plan as to what is going to happen after the lockdown. So we need that as a country, and probably we need to work as a tripartite with government to ensure that we have a proper strategy going forward. I think in short, I would end there and then provide the notes that I said I would properly put in a document and submit to IOE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Israel. I do know that there's a lot you want to cover, there's a lot we need to share, but as I indicated, once we've shared our info, the IOE office will then share with everybody as well and make sure that we learn from your experiences as well. I'm not going to repeat much of what you've said. I want to move over to Timothy, because at the end, I want us to have some time for some questions, and I need to do a little bit of a summary. So Timothy, over to you from the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Am I on?
Yes,
okay,
you are.
Thank you.
You are on. Yep.
Oh, okay, thanks, Mthunzi. I will start sharing our experience by giving a background information with regards to the situation with businesses before COVID-19 in Nigeria, and I'll be very brief with that. Before COVID-19 crisis, many of us in Nigeria, businesses were already struggling due to internal, environmental, and structural factors. And with regards to our experience then, of course, it is not secret knowledge that we've been suffering or operating under a very inclement business environment, despite the effort of government to stop the ease of doing business experience. Part of the experience we had was massive infrastructural deficits, especially supply and borrowed networks, policies inconsistency or policy somersault from government. We also had the issue of high cost of credit, regulatory onslaughts, illegal levy and taxes. Then, to add to all these negative experiences, there was a global crash in the price of crude oil. It has still not recovered, and you recollect that crude oil happens to be the main source of national revenue in Nigeria. This worsened our economic situation, and organized businesses are not insulated from these experiences. And we were also already agonizing that we were headed for another recession before COVID-19 onslaught came on board. which naturally compounds existing problems. As at last night, the total cases in Nigeria was 254. Those that had recovered and discharged were 44, and we've recorded 6 deaths related to COVID. And this morning, there are 254 total cases are shot up to about 276. However, let me not say that we are not deceiving ourselves with the low figure which we put at 254, because some of us believe that those that would have tested positive to COVID or coronavirus will be over 1,000 in Nigeria if proper testing was taking place. The reality is that estimated number of tests that have been carried out in a population of close to 200 million Nigerians is just 5,000 citizens, which means most likely there are more cases, but because we are not testing enough, that is most likely why we believe the number is just about 274 or less than 300 total cases that we have. Having said that, the impact was more felt in major cities that are international gateways. That is where we had the major international airports, especially the cities of Lagos and Abuja. And this is more because COVID-19 unarguably is an import from abroad. And because of this, the first response of government was to close the airports, to say, except by special request, you cannot come into Nigeria again. There was shutdown of all borders, and you also recollect that Nigeria had closed its land borders with neighboring countries before because of economic and security reasons. So all borders were, rather than the temporary or part closure before, were now totally shut down. There were closures of schools, then lockdown in major states. That's Lagos and Abuja being the international gateway. Then Ogun State, that is close to Lagos because of the proximity. And majority of the infected people are actually in these cities. We've had other states with follow-up actions that are far-reaching in their effects on business operations. And I will not belabor you by going through all those effects, but suffice to say that I've shared my talking notes with Aneta already, and she has acknowledged receiving them. One of government's response happens to be is cash transfer policy. 2.6 million families were captured on the social registers. We also believe that this is a far cry from reality, as the World Bank research says half of the 180 million or so population lives below poverty lines of less than $1 per day. So if 50% of our population, which is conservatively put at 90 million, lives below poverty line, and you've just been able to cover 2.6 million families in your cash transfer, it means the vast majority are not reached. And this is a source of concern. And what have we done as the experience has been, or the impact has been on us as employers of labor and organized businesses? Of course, it started 3 weeks ago with an advice by government that we should maintain social distancing and reduce the number of people that are congregated in a particular place to 50 persons. And because of this, we sent advisory notes to our members to ensure that they reduce to the barest minimum the number of workers in the different organizations. And because of this, we also advise them that for as many as can work from home, that are not on essential duty, that requires physical presence, should be encouraged to work from home. Employers were also advised to invest in digital infrastructures. And that's why internet modems, laptops, iPads, and so on and so forth were procured for their workers. And this is an uncharted terrain because, like Jackie said, these are new dispensations which employers are now embracing. Yes, indeed, this worked for some time, but government further reduced the threshold of people who can be in the workplace to around 20, which means even many factories and places of work cannot continue to operate. So, because of this, we had to advise members, even before government formally introduced the total lockdown, to say if it becomes necessary, especially those who are in the provision of production of essential commodities or household goods, those who are in the food and beverages, those who are in the pharmaceutical, these are essential goods that are very important for the survival of the people. To let us know what capacity they have, how long their stock will last, and because of that, we use it to engage government. And government in announcing is total lockdown in major states of Lagos, Ogun, and Federal Capital, made some exceptions, like for pharmaceutical companies that they should continue to produce, household goods, food and beverages, and a few others, like the telecoms, for instance, also should also continue to run their businesses. However, we also discovered that even though we had these exceptions, there were other challenges that were associated, like for instance, logistic challenges for workers getting to work, because if you have restrictions of movement and total lockdown in some cities, especially Lagos State, where the crux of business production takes place, it means there is difficulty getting to places of work. So we have to engage government to get permits for workers in those sectors to be able to commute from home to work. It's not been easy, but at least we were able to work around that in cooperation with government. Then support services, businesses, that ordinarily were not categorized as essential services, like packaging, for instance. Most of the fruit production companies rely on packaging companies. Courier services for distribution of their goods also experience restriction. So we had to get back to government to say, look, you have to be elastic and include this type of companies. Of course, because of the shutdown, there was erratic public power supply, which also impacted on the little production that was going on. The major problem that were faced by a few manufacturing companies that were operating based on their classification as essential commodity producer.
Timothy.
Yes.
You have 30 seconds to round up.
Wow. Okay, I'll try to fast track.
Okay, I'll make it a minute.
The major problem.
Keep it
Yes.
to a minute.
Thank you for your generosity. Getting the essential commodities from factories to different markets in the various states became an issue. And we also had to work with government to relax some of these restrictions. Of course, in the interest of the populace who are faced with restriction, there's the need for these items to get to them. NECA, as representative bodies of employers, initiated a robust engagement with government at all levels. We've had virtual meetings with government. We had far-reaching reliefs to businesses on this concern. But with regards to what social and economic actions have been taken by government, the federal government introduced a 500 billion naira intervention fund. But for us, it is not far-reaching as it is a loan for the pharmaceutical essential household items rather than grants. Many companies are already heavily indebted. Giving them more loans at rates that are not attractive is further burden. So we've been engaging government on how to give grants and to also make sure that what support is given to businesses are very friendly. With regards to commercial banks that you mentioned earlier, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, I want to say that what private
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think I thought that even though I gave you an extra minute, I ended up giving you an extra 4 because I remembered that you are the largest economy in Africa. So we need to give you space and time.
Thank you for consideration.
It's a pleasure. Now, colleagues, do we have some questions before I go to covering some areas? I think, again, just to alert you, those of you who've connected a little bit later than others, I've been tweeting whilst I've been chairing. So I've been tweeting what we are doing to make sure that the IOE, by the way, Roberto was giving me some very impressive news this morning that basically when you look at our activity on social media, we are unsurpassed in terms of our high levels of activity and high levels of involvement, ensuring that our members are reached in all the 159 countries, 150 countries where we have 159 business organizations in. But on the side, I've been seeing some amazing chats. Julie, hello to you, Julie Kazagui from Actemb, West Africa. I saw Farid and Dalia from Actemb, North Africa. I think I also I saw Maria, I think from Pretoria, I'm not sure, but there's also our own Maria, who's the ILO director for the IOE. She's with us and she's busy sending me notes of some things that I need to make you aware of together with Roberto right now. So I think, colleagues, questions before I go for the wrap up and suggestions and recommendations to move forward. Do we have any questions from colleagues other than what has already been asked on the side? There were questions that were asked about partnerships with trade unions, agreements signed with trade unions. And I was thinking aloud and I was thinking, you know, when we had a conversation at our board meeting on Monday, Renate Horning-Draus was telling us about agreements that have been signed in the metal industry in Germany that are extraordinary, that recognize the fact that it's not business as usual, that certain flexibilities need to be taken into cognizance as we move forward. But I see from Douglas in Uganda that there are similar kind of agreements on even agreeing on some layoffs from the messages I've read. Jacqueline also from Kenya has given a similar kind of input that there are special agreements that are being reached with trade unions at this point. There were some suggestions by Wayani from Malawi on what needs to happen and some government intervention. So I'm leaving those on the side, but I'm just alerting you to them. Douglas has given us a very comprehensive list of what they have done as a business organization, very, very comprehensive. And I think we must take that list down because it's going to be very useful in terms of what we need to do and the relevance of our business organizations now. I think, you know, when there's a crisis, it's when our members know us the most, by the way. That's my experience from having served over 15 years in the business organizations and the employer organizations, is that when things get really, really tough, our colleagues know where to find us even more. So we must use that and leverage it. We have that opportunity. Anita, I'm not picking up there any questions as I'm speaking, so I'm going to round off unless anybody that I've missed. No? So I think in rounding up, colleagues, let me just make a few observations. Some very interesting observations have been that throughout the continent's experience, we've gone through challenges such as Ebola, which was mentioned by Anthony just now. We've gone through challenges such as the Arab Spring, which was mentioned by Al Sayed earlier on. We've gone through sudden challenges such as the global financial crisis, but nothing has been as bad as this. Nothing has been as devastating as what we've seen, one, from a health point of view, and two, from an economic point of view. Africa is not feeling the same pain from a health point of view that the rest of the world has seen, particularly the first world. That's the other element about this, is that it's the first time you've seen a crisis that takes down first world infrastructure. I don't know if some of you noticed on Twitter and on LinkedIn that for the first time in the history, I think, of mankind, there were doctors sent from Somalia to Italy. 20 doctors were sent from Somalia to Italy. Cuba, of course, has always been a very big trainer of doctors. Cuba has sent doctors to the whole of Europe. You know, it's changed the dynamic of how things work. Iran, which has had one of the biggest devastations from this crisis, has been getting a lot of assistance as well from Cuba, a lot of assistance from China. It's changed the dynamic of power in the world. It's recalibrating the world as we know it. But it's also clear from what everybody has said that issues of informality are a big challenge for us, to the point where people are asking questions and saying, you know, this lockdown, is it the right response for Africa? Is it correct to say that people must be locked down in small confined spaces? Is it the right response in view of the pre-existing weakness of our economies, the pre-existing weakness of our infrastructure, the fact that our infrastructure is frail right now, physically and virtually, in terms of the weight we are getting, you know, on our resources, and as if that's not a big punishment, South Africa experienced even bigger challenges itself, where we saw the downgrading by the different rating agencies, Moody's, Finch. We also experienced a huge problem with our undersea cable. As if you don't have enough problems, the undersea cable snapped for South Africa. So South Africa and parts of the African continent were experiencing problems with getting information, and also the information overload then becomes a lot more exacerbated. I think that one of the things I was hearing from everybody, and I want to also stress, is the need for data, the need for more information, because for us to have a comprehensive response, that is going to be able to address issues globally, address issues regionally, address issues locally as well, we need as much data as we possibly can have. So we must be able to focus and stress that the IOE is busy compiling a document which we were hoping would be released today. It might be very ambitious given that we're going into the Easter weekend. We're still going to do the best we can. But I think the one thing that is very clear is that we need to move as fast as we can. We're going to see how we can get this to all of you by early next week. But I think to ensure that it's as comprehensive as possible, please send all your information. Israel, don't forget to send your notes, because we've got slides from the other presenters and participants. But I will also ask that we have brevity. You know, like Shakespeare said, brevity is the soul of wit. Let's have brevity. When we write our quick assessments of the government responses throughout the different countries we're involved in, when we come up with those quick assessments, which we must please send to the IOE as urgently as possible, give us about 4-5 paragraphs on one page. Don't give us too much. Just give us crisp 4-5. We've covered the context issues. We've covered the challenges we have. Let's also talk about the responses. I think let's focus a lot on the recommendations, on the issues you feel should be part of the recommendations, because you might have the recommendations and you might have responses by your government, but you may also have issues that you feel are important to be covered. As Timothy was saying, information management and social dialogue become absolutely clear at this stage. We need to ensure that social dialogue, tripartism, multilateralism is not forgotten. We need to demonstrate the importance of social dialogue, of the social conversations that we have, the power of what we have within the ILO and what the IOE is managing for us with assistance from ACTEMP and our colleagues that are connected. I think we will make sure that we also have key follow-up action that is specific to Africa, key follow-up action that is specific to Africa. But for us to have the key follow-up action, we need those assessments from you as part of the document that we shall be giving. I want you to know that I've also written a letter. It's going out today to the DG of the ILO, because in all the conversations I've been having, in all the conversations I've been watching, some of them have just gone in and not participated, just to hear what people are saying and sit on the sidelines and not interfere and interrupt. And whilst the response by the ILO has been very good from a management point of view of the crisis, from responding to the crisis, you know, when we canceled the governing body meetings, the first time in 101 years, when we canceled the International Labour Conference, the first time ever, that's been great. But in terms of the research that's happening now and the information that's coming out, there's a lot of focus on the loss of jobs, and that's great. We need to focus on that. There's a lot of focus on how we must place emphasis on decent work. We must place emphasis on making sure that people's jobs are preserved. But there isn't a similar message coming out on how to preserve our enterprises, on how to preserve our self-employment companies, how to preserve entrepreneurs, how to enable entrepreneurs, small, medium enterprises to be able to do this. Because for me, it's tricky. I don't understand how you stop jobs without, how you preserve jobs rather, without preserving companies. If you don't preserve companies, how do you preserve jobs? You know, it always it boggles the mind how it looks like jobs are supposed to, you know, fall from the clouds and fall from the trees. It doesn't work like that. Companies must be preserved. Companies, there must be interventions for us to be able to save the jobs. So I think employer organizations, colleagues, as I write this letter to Guy, I'll be also asking that we have a balanced approach to everything, balanced approach in messaging, balanced approach, responsible approach, away from being ideologues. Let's move away from being ideologues. Let's move towards pragmatism. Let's move towards solution-orientedness that shows that we are all balanced, that we are all in this together. And I do not want to forget to especially stress the importance of the employer organizations, the constructive policy recommendations to government that we must give. We need to shape the response. If we want to change the recalibration of how we respond to the world, if we want to change issues of social justice and make sure things happen differently as we move into this new world we are faced with, if we want to make sure that we don't waste this crisis, we fully leverage it, we've got to make sure that employer organizations are at the top of the game. We are the ones who are the influencers. We are the ones who ensure that thought leadership of the ILO is driven by thought leadership from private sector members of the IOE. We're a powerful organization. We are very powerful people, but we need to use what we have to be able to save our members and save the economies of our different countries. Colleagues, I want to stop there. Just let you know that I may have not mentioned, we also had a French digital chat that happened yesterday, about 40 participants, to manage things for purposes of ensuring that we all hear each other. Today we had about 96, so all in all, we've had about 136, 140 people connecting. That's a good going. That's very good going. And so without wasting your time any further, let's rather go and focus on the action on the ground. And let me wish you Easter, Passover, Pesach, whatever you celebrate over this weekend. It's going to be a different one. It's one you're never going to forget. I can tell you I'm never going to forget it. I've never been in South Africa in 13 years in March, April, and May. Never been home. It's the first time for me. I'm never going to forget it. It also, on the positive side and the opportunistic side, it brings us closer to our families. You can kiss your kids goodnight for a change. Those of us who are always lost to our homes, and make sure that when we come out of this, because we're going to need all hands on deck, we're going to be very busy, all of us, that at least your kids and your families recognize that you were there for them, that at least during the lockdown, you were a good parent, you were a good brother and a good sister, and you did what needed to be done. So colleagues, thank you very much. Thanks to Anita for coordinating this very good conversation. Thank you to the IOE office, Maria, Roberto. Thanks to our guys from ACTEMP, Gary, Samuel, Farid, Dalia, Samuel, did I mention all of you, in case I forget other people. So thanks, colleagues. Have a good weekend. Thanks a lot.